All right. There you are. All right. Good to see you. Welcome to this week's Torah Parasha. It is Parasha 27. So we're going to start in Leviticus, chapter 12, verse 1, and read through chapter 13, verse 59. Let's get started. All right. Adonai said to Moshe, "Tell the people of Israel, if a woman conceives and gives birth to a boy, she will be unclean for 7 days with the same uncleanness as in Nidah, when she is having her menstrual period. On the 8th day, the baby's foreskin is to be circumcised. She is to wait an additional 33 days to be purified from her blood. She is not to touch any holy thing or come into the sanctuary until the time of her purification is over. But if she gives birth to a girl, she will be unclean for 2 weeks, as in her Nidah, and she is to wait another 66 days to be purified from her blood. When the days of her purification are over, whether for a son or for a daughter, she is to bring a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or dove for a sin offering to the entrance of the tent of meeting to the Kohen. He will offer it before Adonai to make atonement for her. Thus she will be purified from her discharge of blood. This is the law of a woman who gives birth, whether to a boy or to a girl. If she can't afford a lamb, she is to take 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, the one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. The Kohen will make atonement for her, and she will be clean." Adonai said to Moshe and Aaron, "If someone develops on his skin a swelling, scab, or a bright spot, which could develop into the disease Zaraat, he is to be brought to Aaron the Kohen, or to one of his sons who are Kohanim. The Kohen is to examine the sore on his skin. If the hair in the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to go deep into the skin, it is Za'arat. And after examining him, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. If the bright spot on his skin is white, but it does not appear to go deep into the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore appears as the same as before and it is not spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him again, and if the sore has faded and hasn't spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him clean. It is only a scab, so he is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spreads further on the skin after he has been examined by the Kohen and declared clean, he is to let himself be examined yet again by the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the scab has spread on the skin, then the Kohen will declare him unclean. It is Za'arat. If a person has Za'arat, he is to be brought to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that there is a white swelling in the skin which has turned the hair white and inflamed the flesh in the swelling, then it is chronic Za'arat on his skin, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. He is not to isolate him, because it is already clear that he is unclean. If the Za'arat breaks out all over his skin, so that, as far as the Kohen can see, the person with Za'arat has sores everywhere on his body, from his head to his feet, then the Kohen is to examine him, and if he sees that the Za'arat has covered his entire body, he is to pronounce the person with the sores clean. It has all turned white, and he is clean. But if one day inflamed flesh appears on him, he will be unclean. The Kohen will examine the inflamed flesh and declare him unclean. The inflamed flesh is unclean. It is Za'arat. However, if the inflamed flesh again turns white, he is to come to the Kohen. The Kohen will examine him, and if he sees that the sores have turned white, then the Kohen to declare clean is to declare clean the person with sores. He is clean. If a person has on his skin a boil that heals, in such a way that in place of the boil there is a white swelling or a reddish white spot, it is to be shown to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine it. If he sees that it appears to be more than skin deep and its hairs has turned white, then the Kohen is to pronounce him unclean. The disease of Tzara'at has broken out in the boil. But if the Kohen looks at it and doesn't see any white hairs in it, and it isn't more than skin deep but appears faded, the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. If it spreads on the skin, the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is the disease. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the Kohen is to declare him clean. Or if someone has on his skin a burn caused by fire, and the inflamed flesh where it was burned has become a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the Kohen is to examine it. And if he sees that the hair in the bright spot has turned white and that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, it is Zara'at. It has broken out in the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from Zara'at. But if the Kohen examines it and sees no white hair in the bright spot, and it is no more than skin deep but looks faded, then the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine him. If it has spread on the skin, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a sore from Zara'at. But if the bright spot stays where it was and has not spread on the skin, but appears faded, it is a swelling due to the burn, and the Kohen is to declare him clean, because it is only a scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on the head, or a man in his beard, then the Kohen is to examine the sore. If he sees that it appears to be deeper than the skin around it, with yellow, thin hair in it, then the Kohen is to declare him unclean. It is a crusted area, a tzara'at of the head or beard. If the Kohen examines the disease-encrusted area and sees that it appears not to be deeper than the skin around it, and without any black hair in it, then the Kohen is to isolate for 7 days the person with the disease-crusted area. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the sore, and if he sees that the crusted area hasn't spread, that it has no yellow hair in it, and that the crusted area is not deeper than the skin around it, then the person is to be shaved, except for the crusted area itself. And the Kohen is to isolate him for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the Kohen is to examine the crusted area. And if he sees that the crusted area has not spread on the skin and does not appear to be deeper than the skin around it, then the Kohen is to declare him clean. He is to wash his clothes and be clean. But if the crusted area spreads after his purification, then the Kohen is to examine him. And if he sees that the crusted area has spread on the skin, the Kohen is not to look for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the crusted area's appearance doesn't change and black hair grows up in it, then the crusted area is healed. He is clean. The Kohen is to declare him clean. If a man or woman has bright spots on his skin, bright white spots, then the Kohen is to examine them. If he sees that the bright spots on the skin are dull white, it is only a rash that has broken out on the skin. He is clean. If a man's hair has fallen from his scalp, he is bald, but he is clean. If his hair has fallen off the front part of the head, he is forehead bald, but he is clean. But if on the bald scalp or forehead there is a reddish white sore, it is Zara'at breaking out on his bald scalp or forehead. Then the Kohen is to examine him. If he sees that there is a reddish white swelling on his bald scalp or forehead, appearing like zarat on the rest of the body, he is a person with zarat. He is unclean. The Kohen must declare him unclean. The sore is on his head. Everyone who has zarat sores is to wear torn clothing and unbound hair, and cover his upper lip and cry, "Unclean, unclean." As long as he has sores, he will be unclean. Since he is unclean, he must live in isolation. He must live outside the camp. When zarat infects an article of clothing, whether it be a woolen or a linen garment, on the threads or in the woven in parts of either linen or wool, or on a hide or item made of leather, then if the stain on the garment, hide, threads, woven in parts, or leathern item is greenish or reddish, it is an infection of zarat, and it is to be shown to the Kohen. The Kohen is to examine the stain and isolate the article that has the infection for 7 days. On the 7th day, he is to examine the stain. If the stain has spread on the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leather, whatever its use, the infection is a contagious zarat. The garment is unclean. He is to burn the garment, threads, woven in parts of either wool or linen, or item of leather having the infection, for it is a contagious zarat. It must be burned up completely. But if, when the Kohen examines it, he sees that the infection has not spread on the garment or in the threads, woven in parts, or leathern item, then the Kohen is to order that the article having the infection be washed and isolated for 7 more days. The Kohen is to examine it after the stain has been washed, and if he sees that the stain has not changed color, then even though the stain has not spread, it is unclean. You are to burn it up completely. It is unclean. You are to burn it up completely. It is rotten, no matter whether the spot is on the outside or on the inside. If the Kohen examines it and sees that the stain has faded after being washed, then he is to tear the stain out of the garment, leathern, threads, or woven in parts. If it appears to gain in the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leathern item, it is contagious, and you are to burn up completely the article that had the stain. But if the infection is gone from the garment, threads, woven in parts, or leathern item that you washed, then it is to be washed a second time, and it will be clean. This is the law concerning infections of zarat in a garment of wool or linen, or in the threads, or the woven in parts, or in any leathern item, when to declare it clean and when to declare it unclean. All right, now we're going to do the Haftarah. It is in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 42, and we're going to go through 5:19. All right. Here we go. Yes. All right, so we're in 2 Kings chapter 4. A man came from Baal Shalisha, bringing the man of God 20 loaves of bread made from the barley firstfruits and fresh ears of grain in his sack. Elisha said, "Give this to the people to eat." His servant said, "How am I to serve this to 100 men?" But he said, "Give it to the people to eat, for Adonai says that they will eat and have some left over." So he served them, and they ate and had some left over, as Adonai had said. Then Naaman, commander of the king of Aram's army, was highly respected and esteemed by his master, because through him Adonai had brought victory to Aram. But although he was a brave warrior, he also suffered from zarat. Now, on one of their raids into Israel's territory, Aram carried away captive a little girl who became a servant for Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, I wish my lord could go to the prophet in Shomron. He could heal his tzaraat. Naaman went in and told his lord, the girl from the land of Israel said such and such. The king of Aram said, Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. He set out, taking with him 660 pounds of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. He brought the king of Israel's the letter, which said, When this letter reaches you, you will see that I have sent my servant Naaman to you, so that you can heal his tzaraat. When the king of Israel finished reading the letter, he tore his clothes. Am I God, able to kill and make alive, he asked, so that he sends me a man to heal of tzaraat? You could see that he is only seeking an excuse to quarrel with me. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. Why did you tear your clothes? Just have him come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, who said, Go and bathe in the Jordan 7 times. Your skin will become as it was, and you will be clean. But Naaman became angry and left, saying, Here now, I thought for certain that he would come out personally, that he would stand, call on the name of Adonai his God, and wave his hand over the diseased place, and thus heal the person with tzaraat. Aren't Amanam and Papar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the water in Israel? Why can't I bathe in them and be clean? So he turned and went off in a rage. But his servants approached him and said, My father, if the prophet had asked you to do something really difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So doesn't it make even more sense to do what he says when it's only bathe and be clean? So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, as the man of God had said to do. And his skin was restored and became like the skin of a child, and he became clean. Then, with his whole retinue, he returned to the man of God, went and stood before him and said, Well, I've learned that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Therefore, please accept a present from your servant. But Elisha answered, As Adonai lives before whom I stand, I will not accept it. And despite his urging him to take it, he refused. So Naaman said, If you want to take it, then please let your servant be given as much earth as 2 mules can carry, because from now on your servant will offer neither burnt offerings nor sacrifices to other gods, but only to Adonai. Accept this, and may Adonai forgive your servant for it. When my master goes into the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow down, may Adonai forgive your servant for this. Elisha said to him, Go in peace. All right. Thank you so much for joining today. See you guys next time. Shabbat shalom.